Welcome to Holy Transfiguration Cathedral Church in Globeville. I'm Drew Dutcher. I'm from the Illyria Swansea Neighborhood Association, but I want to first introduce kind of where we are. Globeville, Illyria, and Swansea really are bonded together in a very strong way. We face the same issues, the same history, the same challenges, and this, including problems with pollution, which is what we're going to talk about today. We have a great program to focusing on air pollution. But first, I want to introduce Shaina Oliver from Mom's Clean Air Force. Shaina, do you want to talk about yourself and what you're doing?
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really glad to be here in this neighborhood. I live in the Northeast Denver area of Hartsfield. But I'm also from the Navajo Reservation. I'm a tribal member with that Northeast North division of the Navajo Nation. My family came here when the Relocation Act was enacted in the 60s, 70s. When the Native community started being more in existence here. Unfortunately, they had to move back because they couldn't be here and have a standing home on the reservation. Yes. They had to literally occupy it in order to keep that home. So they went back and occupied their settlement from where they settled after the long walk of the Navajos. I do consider myself and my family as descendants of the genocide known as the Indian Removal Act, known to my people as the Long Walk of the Navajo. I work with Mom's Clean Air Force at Equilage, Colorado chapter, working on environmental justice to the Navajo. From the Navajo Reservation, a lot of extraction has been implemented in our treaties. As an obligation to our people. And what we see here in this neighborhood is extractivism, exploiting this community and undermining the people's health in this area. So I like to recognize that I'm not on my ancestral lands, but in southern Colorado, the Navajo people did occupy in southern Colorado between the sacred mountains that we have here in Colorado. Which are in the southern regions of southwest Colorado. And I want to acknowledge that we do stand on the land of the Cheyenne and Arapaho, Shoshone, Kiowa, Comanche, as well as 48 other tribes that also occupy the west and the state that we know as Colorado. Right? There were no borders back then. We did coexist. And that's how a lot of people were able to live here. There was a point in history where Colorado had more than one language on their voting ballots. And I want to continue that history of being diverse. But we first got to acknowledge the people that were standing on their land, on their ancestral lands, that they were forcibly removed through genocidal policies like the Indian Removal Act and the Indian Act and the many policies that came after that, and to this day still impact our communities as Native people, as well as brown and Black people also are impacted by these same policies, as well as the new generation needs to understand these policies as well, and how they impact our communities. So I just have like a moment of silence for the people that we stand on their lands of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, and 48 tribes. And I want to do that because over 2,000 Demet children never returned to their families during the period of the Spanish invasion, as well as when the Western settlers came. That a lot of children never came back, and a lot of families didn't make it through the Indian removal era. So thank you for holding the space And I want to continue working with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaina. This is great. We're going to get kind of an early start with Cultivando. Laura Martinez from Cultivando is going to speak. Shaina, did you also? You're part of Cultivando too. So
Am I thinking as moms or as
I thought we could hear about Mom's Clean Air course because you're doing kind of your own work.
Yeah.
You know, first I want to say we're focusing on air pollution here because I think just as sort of one of my last things to do in Inc., I wanted us to address what I think is maybe one of the biggest problems we have in Denver, which is pollution and air pollution. There was a point where it was named in the press that Denver had the worst air in the world. And we are right now in the most polluted zip code in the nation. Today's a beautiful day, but we really have the air pollution is a threat, not just to our health, but quality of life. And air pollution does not respect boundaries for neighborhoods. It travels, it's a problem for all of us. So that's why we're going to talk about it today. So I'm going to have Candi CdeBaca first come up. Candi is our council representative from District Columbia. And Candi, great to see you. Thank you. Candi, you want to welcome us?
I just want to say welcome to District 9 and to my community. My family's been in this neighborhood and across the highway in the Swansea neighborhood for 5 generations. Southern Colorado and Northern New Mexico are our ancestral lands on my maternal side. My family filed the first lawsuit against ASARCO. It was CdeBaca versus ASARCO. That triggered the acknowledgement and consequential cleanup. And so my race to city council was kind of catalyzed by the environmental issues and living in a Superfund site my whole life. I started my activism as a block captain at 5 years old, handing out flyers about the lawsuit and the consequent cleanups, and never knew that it would bring me to the place where I'm at now, representing my community. I am often not successful at the local level in addressing our pollution issues because a lot of our biggest polluters are not on the county line, on the Denver County side. And so last year we were trying to implement a pollution trespass ordinance and we're unsuccessful with that. But we ended up working with our state legislators and bringing our coalition to the Golden Dome and passed the state's first air monitoring bill. And that is super important for our community because we've been monitoring our air in different ways through nonprofits for a long time. And that data was never acknowledged as valid because it wasn't conducted by CDPHE. And so a big piece of the air monitoring bill, it didn't go as far as we wanted it to, we'll be back at it, but a big piece of it was that community science is now recognized in the benchmarking of pollutants. And so that was a huge win for our community. And we're working with Cultivando and moms to monitor air around Suncor right now. We've got we were able to trigger an investigation by the EPA of Suncor, and we're waiting for those results. They've been shut down partially for a little while, and we're hoping that the results of that investigation give us some leverage for some accountability. And we're glad to have you all here because a lot of people in Denver don't really know what it's like in these neighborhoods. So thank you for coming out. I hope you guys come out more. And I hope Inc. really takes on this pollution issue as a core thing that you all want to address. And I would love to be your champion on council, getting it done at the local level. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, can we just take a second here? For everybody that's speaking, that hour, we don't think that's working. So this, if you can step back a little bit towards the screen when you're talking and then talk a little louder.
Like
just because
here?
there's people online that are saying they can't hear. very
Oh,
well.
okay.
So-
How is this?
Just
I think-
project like
yeah, I
on
think it's
stage.
good.
Get to the owl.
But yeah,
Yeah.
this is the owl that's working. Sorry, we're still working on the
That's
technical stuff
okay.
here.
Technology is something.
But yeah, we have 40 people at this meeting between us here and the 27 online. So, yeah.
Great, great. It's good to check in with the people online. That's a good crowd. So I think we'll formally begin our presentation with Shaina Oliver talking about her work in Mountains Clean Air Force. And then I allowed about 5 minutes. And then Laura Martinez from Cultivando will talk about Cultivando's work. So.
Thank you. So yes, I work with a national organization known as Moms Clean Air Force. They also have a branch part of the Eco Madres, which focus primarily on Latino community and having resources for the community as well, and having them ready and available in Spanish as well as in English. And a lot of our fact sheets can be found on our website of momscleanairforce.org. So it is the national organization of over 1 million moms and dads that are united in fighting for our children's right to clean air, to live, play, and learn, and breathe clean air. And one of the aspects about Moms Clean Air Force is speaking up for our children who don't have a seat at the table as well as those that are unborn. Focus a lot on maternal health as well as women's health and children's health are a big priority in our work. On clean air policies, public health has been one of those things that I've been advocating for at the local level, as well as we keep fighting for clean air. Public health is an important piece of environmental justice, because we see that our communities are impacted that way. So I've been utilizing Moms Clean Air Force resources to engage with community members about the concept of air pollution having an impact in our environment and our health, and how our health has a lot to do with the air pollution and the environment that we're placed in as well. And a lot of that falls into environmental justice. And my work with Moms Clean Air Force is to really support groups and networks and grassroots organizations like Cultivando that can lead the work on community air monitoring projects. We've been a vital role in pushing federal representatives like Congress and senators to provide funding, especially environmental justice funding to the communities through the IRA, through the environmental grant funding program with the EPA, which has helped stimulus create an ongoing funding for Cultivando to continue their community air monitoring project that they can explain how they got to that point. But I think we're well aware that Suncor Refinery had to pay up on some of those funding that kicked off the Cultivando community air monitoring project. So we've been really supportive in that way of making sure that communities are receiving funding, as well as tribal communities are receiving funding as well. They have been prioritized, but it's easier for local cities and states to obtain those funding than it is for tribal communities, because tribes have different needs for their communities when it's addressing environmental justice. Because as Indigenous people, we don't just look at environmental justice as just air or water. We see a component of like our environment, our life, education, employment, health services, nutrition, housing. All those things play a part in our environment. And as Indigenous people, it's hard to do work that divides our communities, and a lot of our division is at the state level with water department over here, air department over here. So environmental justice has been a real focal point for my work with Moms Clean Air Force and bridging our communities here, supporting a variety of communities, supporting Black Parents United Foundation, Cultivando, working with United Indigenous Dancers to also help influence our Native community members here to take more action in environmental work. Because their voices are vital to the lands, and especially as still being descendants of these lands that we stand on. So a lot of my work there with Moms Clean Air Force started at a big winter rally on fracking. I started as a volunteer. I overheard on the public radio that they had an action event. I wanted to check it out because as a mom, I felt like as mothers, like we have a responsibility to our children. But as an Indigenous person, we have a responsibility to the next generation, whether it's our kids or someone else's kids, that we need to make sure that we provide an environment that is useful to them and viable, where they can thrive and live. And a lot of our older generations kind of forget to extend that next generation concept of ensuring that there is a viable community after them. And a lot of it right now, we're up against time about saving water and how we're going to address the air pollution problem now that has such an impact on our health in so many ways that 5 minutes is not enough to share on those things. But you can always visit Moms Clean Air Force site at momscleanairforce.org and see the resources that we provide to communities. I have a few fact sheets in the back that I utilize in the community currently. There's the Cultivando fact sheet back there, how to get connected with Cultivando, and the air program that Nora will speak about, as well as the air pollution problem and Latino communities, air pollution and Indigenous people in the United States, as well as I have other fact sheets too, because we're also talking about PFAS right now. PFAS is one of those things where we're just starting to regulate. A couple of years ago, a few of our moms here in the local area probably know her very well. Lucy Molina, who did a documentary right now called A Good Neighbor. You guys should check it out. It's only screening in Colorado right now. We were able to advocate for the water department to start regulating PFAS a couple of years ago, and now it's like we're seeing the results, and people are not liking what they're hearing. That now we got to watch out for eating wildlife, so we got to be mindful when we eat the fish or the wildlife that are being hunted. That they have an increased amount of PFAS in their system from drinking water that's not being filtered correctly. Right now, we have an issue where industries are allowed to discharge waste into our waterways as well as our air. As ways of handling waste from these facilities that Candi had mentioned about the lawsuit. So it's ongoing, but in the policies, they're allowed to, and that's what we have to change. We have to change our concept of how we see our communities and what we see as viable, and we really need to reduce our use. So thank you for having me, and I will hand it off back to you.
Hey, Shaina, can you just 2 seconds tell people what PFAS is? Because I guarantee you 90% of the people don't know.
Okay, so
Yeah.
PFAS is a forever chemical that doesn't break down. It doesn't break down when it's entered our body either. So PFAS is known as a forever chemical that is utilized in many industries, like Suncor Refinery also utilizes PFAS. Many industries, many products that we use utilize PFAS, which is now known as PFAS, which is forever chemicals. Those chemicals don't break down in our bodies, unfortunately. So we're just starting to regulate it and learn more about it. So we'll be I have some PFAS fact sheets that I'll place out. I ran out of time, so I'm gonna put them out now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shaina Oliver. Laura Martinez from Cultivando. So, you've done a lot of work. And I know you had a press conference, I think, March 16th or so, and that was 15th. And so, if you want to come introduce yourself, I don't know what's easier for you, Laura, with your computer. Make yourself comfortable here, but you've done a lot of work, and so, Cultivando is a very valuable, player in the fight against pollution. So Laura Martinez, tell us about your work.
Thank you, everyone. Good morning. It's a pleasure and an honor for me to be here. As Drew had already mentioned, my name is Laura Martinez. I am manager of environmental justice programs for Cultivando. We have been doing the IDEA project, which is air quality investigation and institutional equity, for a little bit over a year. We've been focusing primarily in Commerce City and Globeville, Elyria, and Swansea communities, pretty much surrounding Sunport. What we measured in our research is a couple of air pollutants that are pretty harmful to our health. Some of them are carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, ozone, hydrogen sulfide, and of course the VOCs, the volatile organic compounds such as benzene, toluene, and as well as radioactivity. Actually, Boulder Air, our contract, is one of the few that's actually measuring radioactivity. And we did this because that is one of the sources or prime sources of radioactivity is oil and gas. And the reason why we're measuring it. Okay. One of the pollutants that we focus primarily on is particulate matter 2.5 and particulate matter 10. My interest in this research and in our project is 2.5 because of the size. As you can tell, it's very small compared to human hair. And because it's so small, it can get stuck in the lungs. It's easier for it to get stuck in the lungs, making it a lot more harmful to our health when inhaled at higher quantities. Okay. Some of the findings, I'm not going to explain all of them in the interest of time. However, some of the findings that we did find or are presented in our press conference is the high availability in pollutant concentration, so they can peak within like 30 seconds, a minute, and then come back down. It also depends on whether it's or night because of the wind direction and seasonal. It's higher during the winter than during the summer. And also differences in pollutant concentrations with location. We did Boulder Air, a contractor also does air monitoring in several other locations throughout Colorado. And so we did the comparisons between those locations and our Commerce City permanent mobile sites. Also, the multiple pollutants present at the time, as we all are aware, there are several pollutant sources around our community that can contribute to these higher levels of pollutants. We also have sources of airborne radioactivity, which is, again, can be something related to oil and gas. This is just one of the examples of what we found. This is for the particulate matter 10, and it could go up to thousands, it could change up to 1,000 times in a few minutes. And these peaks right here, they only last a few minutes. So because of that, it's kind of, the state and Sunport have their own monitoring that they do. However, the averages are 60 minutes, or 60-minute averages. And because of that, and the high variability in these pollutants, they don't capture that. And that's why our monitoring is very important to both Commerce City and DES. This is one example of what we're trying to show what happened or what we found is Sunport Refinery. As you can tell, it's a little red, purple oval. And then depending on the distance from Sunport, you can see the level of benzene that we found. And these are the radial monitors or passive collection samples that we change weekly. And this particular one is at the Riverside location, so it's closest to Sunport. But on the north, if you see on the north, on the permanent mobile site, which is at CCF, and the Birch Street, which is around close to where the old Adams City High School was at, the levels were pretty high compared to the south. And Kearney, which we're still trying to figure out why it was pretty high as well. But that tells us a lot. For me, this means a lot because on the birth side of that particular site, someone, there was a 20-year-old that started presenting symptoms such as stomach pains and nausea and all of these symptoms together when he came back from college to visit home that he lived in that area. And within a span of few months, they detected stomach cancer on him and he passed away. Why is this important? For me, it's important because there's no history in his family of cancer. And he's lived in this community, in this home since he was young, elementary school. There's no history. No one else in his family had any symptoms related to that except him. After he passed away, one of his relatives, a small child, started presenting similar symptoms. And because of that, they decided to move away. But that for me means a lot because we know that family, they're very involved in our community, and it's also really close to Southport. So having that correlation with this, to me, has a big impact on what it is that our community is experiencing. And I know that they're not the only ones, but that's the one that I can explain and talk about because I've seen. These are the other sites that Boulder Air does air monitoring. There are different locations such as Longmont, Boulder, Broomfield. A lot of the comparisons that we will be doing, that I will be showing here, are with the Broomfield Soaring Eagle location, which is the light lime green circle right up here. This is one example of what we're seeing. For example, for particulate matter 2.5, which is what I said, the small particulate matter, it's really small, and because it's so small, it's easier to get stuck into our lungs. In Broomfield, our measurement is, our threshold is 35 micrograms per cubic meter, which is about right here. And as you can see in Broomfield, it only exceeded that threshold about 380 times. In Commerce City, which is around that, this location is around 64th in Colorado, it exceeded it 12,000 times, over 12,000 times in so that's 40 times more than the Broomfield site. And so here are the peaks. And again, like I said, the other two monitoring systems that are used in the state do not measure this because of the way that they take the measurements. Another source or pollutant that we measured is hydrogen sulfide. That on the top left corner, you will see some of the effects of breathing in hydrogen sulfide, specifically at higher levels. Some of them could be wheezing, cough, fatigue, and difficulty breathing. And again, the comparison between the Broomfield site, which is the green, and then the Commerce City site, which is the blue. You can see the site difference. And this is just in October. Why is this important too? Because as you can tell in the Broomfield site, it exceeded the threshold of 0 times, and in Commerce City, 7,557 times, which is, and this is within 1 minute. Another pollutant that we measured is benzene. Again, benzene is also very harmful because it is a VOC and it increases the chances of getting cancer. It's very harmful to our health. And you can see again the differences between Broomfield and Commerce City. The levels are extremely high as well. And this is between October and December. And it doesn't matter, again, as you can tell, the differences are very stark. To compare to all of the other sites that Boulder Air measures, you can see right here. So the purple one, this one right here, that's Commerce City. And then all of these are the other sites. Our threshold for benzene is 0.9 parts per billion. As you can see, it already, even with the 95 percentile, it's exceeded both in the permanent site as well as the mobile site. The mobile monitor during the first part of the first 3 quarters of the project, we were moving around within Commerce City and GES. And it's towards the end that we moved it to a permanent location here in Denver. I'm sorry?
Which one is in Denver?
The one that's in Denver right now is this one right here.
Where is the location?
Right now it's at the Denver Inn. So right south from Riverside.
Yeah, that's right near the Illyria neighborhood.
Yes,
Right, near Swansea.
and that's a great location because it captures the direction, the wind direction on this side. And it's so it's kind of like a diagonal location from the permanent site in Commerce City. And just to give you an idea, the CCF, like I had mentioned, that's a permanent site, the mobile site is a CCM. And the times that it's exceeded those limits is pretty different or pretty noticeable compared to all of the other sites. And it tells you right here what the averages are that we've been measuring. Like I said, we measure that 10 minutes averages for ethane, propane, and then for some of the other ones like particulate matter every minute. Benzene every 10 minutes. So. I apologize if I'm going really fast. You know, I'm very limited in time.
Yes.
There's so much more information I want to give you, but if you want to see the entire presentation, I can definitely share the link to our press conference with you, so you can take your time and watch it and have an actual scientist explain this.
Can we share your slideshow with everybody as well after this? Or
Yeah.
your deck or whatever?
Yes.
Okay, we'll make sure we do.
I can send you a link. It's also on our website.
Yeah, it would be good if Inc. provided that link too.
Yes.
to
Yeah.
everyone.
Okay, yes, I'll definitely share it with you, so you can share it, and you can watch the presentation on me, better explained. I apologize for that. Some of the, what we noticed too is the multiple pollutants are higher, and one of the things we noticed is that, for example, when we had high levels of benzene, it's not just benzene that we had high levels of. At the same time, we could also see methane or particulate matter 2.5 or NOx. And that's one of the things that there isn't enough research in. What happens when someone breathes in high levels of benzene, methane, hydrogen sulfide, particulate matter, of all of these pollutants at the same time? And that's where the danger hides, is that because we don't really know how much, or we don't have actual research on that done previously, and we don't have anything to compare to, but our community already knows what happens because we have an experience. And just to conclude this part is some of the findings is that we have, like I mentioned before, the high variability in pollutant concentrations, the differences in concentrations depending the location. They're much higher in Commerce City at the Commerce City fixed site than in other locations. We have multiple pollutants present at the same time, which is what I had just mentioned, and diverse sources of different pollutants. This is something I didn't go into, but some of the potential sources in the around this fixed site, the Commerce City fixed site, is the water treatment facility, Suncor, the affordable propane, and AmeriGas propane. Now that's just a few. And just because we have certain or multiple sources doesn't mean that one doesn't emit pollutants and the other one does. They all do. So we need to hold all of them accountable. Now, what does this mean to us? Like I mentioned earlier, all of these breathing in all of these pollutants at once is what causes a lot of times those health effects that we see in our community. So what happens? So when we emit, for example, particulate matter 2.5, it goes into the air and then attaches to some of these other pollutants, for example, benzene. And instead of 2.5 being just harmful the way it is, it multiplies itself in 10, it makes it 10 times more harmful when it attaches itself to other pollutants, so benzene, cooling, and that increases to the risk that it provides for our family. So it goes from 3 to 20-fold increase in uptake.
Laura, we are gonna try to wrap it up soon. Thank you.
I have 2 more slides.
It's okay.
And so this is just some of the things that we can do. Pretty much is just understand that we need stability in the way that we collect pollutant samples and, you know, in periods of hours, days, weeks, and right now they're not designed to regulate variation of mixtures over a short time term. So we need to also work on that and making sure that we have a better way of measuring the impact cumulatively. So this is just some of the alerts that were exceeded and some of the effects that these pollutants have in our system and especially in our children. And this one too, here's another one with ozone, particulate radioactivity and methane. So what's next? Like Drew had mentioned before, we did have our press conference on March 15, 2023 at the University of Denver, and I can share that link with you. We're also working on upgrading our monitor here at the Denver site. However, we need funds. We're looking for additional funds right now because if we don't get those funds, we can't monitor. We can't continue to monitoring that. So that's one of the things that we're doing. Another thing we're working on is community awareness. Right now, last week we started our GES environmental justice training on Wednesdays at focus points where we educate the community on what is environmental justice, how does the state involved, and what we can do as a community. We're also working on community advocacy, having those conversations with community members that live here, seeing what is it that they want, what do they envision in the future, how has this impacted them. And one of the events we had was the reimagining a healthy and safe future beyond Suncor, where they kind of gave us their ideas of what their ideal future would be like, and more community involvement, and ideally in the long run or in the future, so policy change. So that is it.
Thank you, Laura. Thanks so much. I think we'll save questions for the end because we've got several more speakers here. So next is Esther Sullivan, I believe. And I don't know if you'll be sharing your scripture. That's working good. Okay, Esther, good to see you. You're going to talk about your work. Maybe you introduce yourself and your work. You have 10 minutes.
Esther, you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted. Oh,
You're muted, Esther.
Of course I am. What other way to start a Zoom meeting is there? Thank you so much for having me here today. Can everybody hear me okay and see these slides?
We can.
yep.
So I'm Esther Sullivan. I'm a professor of sociology at the University of Colorado, Denver, and I'm here to talk a bit about our study, Social Justice and Environmental Quality in Denver, or SOJEC-D as we call it, and I put the website for our project in the chat. This is a study about air quality and well-being, and we'll talk a bit about why it's important for all Denver neighborhoods, but it's especially important in these North Denver neighborhoods of Globeville, Elyria, Swansea, Clayton, and Cole. So here's our team, and I'm here today with my colleague, Dr. Shelly Miller, who's going to talk next about the science of air quality. And our project is truly a really interdisciplinary collaboration between the environmental sciences, social sciences, the computer sciences that are working together to assist residents in communities that are impacted by multiple sources of environmental pollution, plus the widening of I-70 and the additional construction pollution that entails. So here's a map of these communities, and the black line is where the I-70 construction is occurring. And many of these are the same kind of communities that Cultivando is working in. Our study is a little different. It provides community members with personal low-cost air sensors to monitor their air quality, and then a set of smartphone apps that our computer scientists developed so that they're able to report on their health and well-being. But I'm going to focus on air quality in my comments today. So of course, our work builds on organizations that have been working in these neighborhoods: Cultivando, Green Latinos, the GS Coalition, and many other individuals and community organizations who have been documenting environmental health concerns in North Denver. These North Denver communities are communities where over 40% of households are people of color. Between 5 and 57% of households are low income, and all have a Colorado Department of Health and Public Health and Environment, CDPHE, their EnviroScreen score, which measures environmental burden, of over 77%, meaning that they're more environmentally burdened than 77% of census tracts in Colorado. So how did we get here? As a sociologist, I feel like I would be remiss not to acknowledge that present day inequalities have structural origins, and they date back in Denver to a history of redlining. So these communities outlined here are the same ones that are outlined here in this historic redlining map of Denver. And redlining was a process that targeted communities for underinvestment. And then a history of planning and zoning regulations then allowed industrial facilities to be located in these redlined communities. And the result is that today, these 4 historic Denver neighborhoods have rows of, single family homes and duplexes and small apartments and small businesses that are interspersed with industrial facilities like asphalt manufacturers, metal smelters, tank storage, and then bigger ones like Superfund sites, the Purina dog food factory, and of course, the neighboring Suncor refinery. Because of that, these communities are considered disproportionately impacted by industrial and traffic pollution, and they have elevated rates of asthma and COPD compared to other regions of Colorado, as well as a variety of other public health concerns that are being, consistently documented by public health studies. So this is what we know, that the burdens of air pollution are not distributed across Denver costs, and these are neighborhoods that are lower income and they're home to households of color. So Shelly is going to talk next more about the science of how we measure air quality and what some of our most pressing air quality concerns are in Denver. But I wanted to use just the brief time that I have remaining to talk a little bit about what happens when you partner with people in a highly impacted community and allow them to measure their own air quality. So we provided these low-cost personal sensors like the one you see here on this woman's purse. It's called the Atmo tube. And this is a little different than the kind of air monitoring that Cultivando does, because this is personal air monitoring. And so this Atmo tube, it reports instantaneously to a smartphone app that allows residents to see their air quality. This is an example of what they would see in the app. So they see all of their particulate matter and then an overall air quality score, and the Atmo tube can go with them everywhere. It goes inside their home, outside their home, on their commute, between different rooms that they're traveling in. So the data from the Atmo tube is really allowing community members to certainly document some of the same kinds of concerns that our colleagues at Cultivando discussed, but it's also catalyzing a different kind of shift in how people experience air quality. And as a sociologist, that's the kind of piece that I wanted to conclude my comments discussing with you. So to understand this shift in how air monitoring may change people's experience of air quality, we interviewed residents one-on-one after they participated in these 30-day periods of carrying the air monitor. And we found that these air sensors really build pollution exposure awareness. Participants are able to access and understand sensor data via the Atmo tube app, regardless of their pre-existing level of scientific literacy. Participants documented concerns not only within their neighborhood, but even more so within their homes. So concerns related to indoor air quality as well as outdoor air quality. 71% of our participants said that the main benefit of carrying the sensor was building awareness about air pollution, especially as it relates to health. And we found that community members really willingly and actively engaged as community scientists to uncover the causes of their poor air quality. So for our study, these participants were only asked to carry around these monitors and then sync them each day to report the data. But when we followed up with them in interviews, we found that they had actively experimented, with a range of kind of experiment styles, and that they used their sensors in 3 primary ways: to validate existing concerns over known polluters in their area, like noxious odors that come from some of the, for instance, local smelters in their neighborhoods. They use them to uncover new and previously unknown sources of air pollution. This was especially true indoors. Things like cooking, household chemicals, even sometimes closing the windows to eliminate outdoor air pollution, but then, making too much of a sealed envelope that didn't allow for circulation in the home. And lastly, they use them to investigate health concerns. And they reported a range of different health concerns that they used the atmotube to investigate. But I'll just give you an example of Susan, who was a kind of a chronic allergy sufferer, who told us, over time, I kept showing my partner that the air quality is best by 5 or 10 points when we have the purifier on. Previously, she said she was unsure if it even made a difference or worked. She said, now we have it on schedule right before we come home, and it stays on till bedtime. And this is important because, just as I said, our study wasn't designed to implement behavioral change, but we found that air quality sensors really sparked behavioral change in our participants. So 50% of our participants adopted some kind of mitigating behavior after identifying poor air quality with their sensors. And this included either, they would use it to identify a specific source of concern, like, why is my reading so high? They associated it with marijuana smoking. They said, I didn't know smoking marijuana I thought it was better than cigarettes. Or they associated it with particular household cleaners that they used. Behavioral changes included things like running humidifiers and air purifiers, or running the household fan, even without the heat on, just running the house fan, cleaning ducts, replacing HVAC filters, opening windows. 40% of our participants adopted what we call protective behaviors, which is just things like going outside when they read that their air quality was better outside than inside, or traveling to locations in their neighborhood that had better air quality scores. Now, of course, there's limitations to this kind of study. 14 out of 38 residents that we interviewed said that they understood their air quality reading, but that they felt powerless to change the situation. 10 out of 38 said that, reported that they needed more education, that they felt that they didn't know what to do in order to improve their air quality, or that they wanted specific guidance in order to improve their air quality. So just, as our colleagues at Cultivando said, education is a clear next step. But we hope, that our work will contribute to a broader conversation, not only about air quality in Denver, but also about the benefits of air quality awareness. And to that end, I just want to say that we're always looking for ways to make this study more sustainable and really turn it into a sustainable system for community air monitoring. And so if anybody here today has ideas towards that, we are always wanting to connect with people. So with that, I'll just say thank you and turn it over to my colleague, Shelly.
That's great. Thank you, Esther. Thanks for your work. Thank you. Shelly Miller now. Hi.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Yes, great to see you. Thanks for the invite. I wish I could be there in person.
Want to introduce your
Yeah.
I got it.
Just tell me when it's, yeah.
But she's not sharing.
I-
You're not sharing it, Shelley.
Not yet. No,
Should have permission.
Shelly Miller starts. Okay.
Okay, now it's coming up.
okay. Great. Well, thank you for the invite. And thank you, Esther. That was just a really great summary of our project. I'm going to step back a little bit more and talk a little bit more globally about air pollution in Denver and a few other projects that we've done in Denver to help with the air pollution problem. So I will just briefly touch on a few topics here. And I'm a professor of urban air pollution in the environmental engineering program at CU Boulder. I've been with CU Boulder for over 20 years and working on urban air pollution problems. I just wanted to put this summary slide up because the effects of air pollution are global problems. And while we are focusing on things happening in our own communities, there are very significant problems globally that are causing premature death and illness across the globe. And so not only do we need to focus on what's happening at home, but paying attention to the communities across the world that are also suffering from the impacts of air pollution. Denver became known for its problematic air pollution more than a century ago. In 1889, the Denver Times reported that disease had started to spread to the entire population and bad air was hurting the city's reputation. We didn't really address air pollution problems, however, until the 1950s, when thousands of people began dying from localized air pollution events in London, in Pittsburgh, and other places around the world. And finally, communities began to wake up and realize they needed to be addressing air pollution problems. So Colorado historically has been pretty decent with their PM 2.5. This is the ultra-fine particulate matter that you heard about in the presentation with Cultivando. These are data from the 1990s, 2000s, all the way up to 2020, showing that we're below the National Ambient Air Quality Standard. However, there's no safe level for PM 2.5. And also then you can see across the United States that we are sort of generally in the medium range of the PM 2.5 problem. We have a significant ozone problem. I'm sure many of you are aware of that, and we are continuing to struggle. And we have been heavily cited by the EPA because we cannot solve this problem. And the reason we're having so many problems is we have a lot of volatile organic compound emissions, and we have a lot of automotive emissions. And when these mix in the atmosphere with all of our wonderful sun, we get a lot of ozone. So this is our number one problem in Denver. And I want to show this success. Nitrogen dioxide is a very toxic pollutant that causes cardiovascular disease and premature death. We have successfully decreased our nitrogen dioxide problem over the course of many decades. And so this is something to be proud of, I would say, in Denver, that despite growth in population, growth in vehicle miles traveled, that we can find solutions when we work together to solve our air pollution problem. One of the most difficult problems in Denver that I have been associated in trying to help is the industrial odor problem. And here right around Globeville are all of the industrial sources that are contributing to this problem. The community of Globeville came to Groundwork Denver and asked if they knew of somebody who could help them with identifying an odor issue. And so they reached out to me in my class at CU Boulder, my air pollution class, and we worked with the community to try to uncover the problems with the industrial odors. And so I'll share a little bit about what we've been doing in that arena. This is a picture of one of your neighbors collecting air samples for us. Whenever we would smell an odor, Bobby would run out to the backyard and take a sample for us. Then we would send those samples in to be analyzed. These data show the air toxics. You can see benzene here, which is one of the major toxics that Cultivando is that, we didn't have a lot of money to take a lot of samples, but we did collect one sample with very high naphthalene. Naphthalene is a carcinogen. It is emitted from asphalt manufacturing. We worked very hard to try to figure out if this naphthalene was coming from one of your industrial neighbors. We took a lot of wind direction information and found that the wind was coming from that direction with the asphalt industry into the neighborhood when the samples were being taken. And so we extended this work to now not only talk to people in North Denver, but also in Pueblo, in Greeley, in Fort Lupton, and Fort Collins. And we reached over 300 participants in our odor survey, and we asked them to report us their odors and where they were. They could also make an official complaint to the city of Denver. So on the left, you see our Report Odors app. You tell us when you sense an odor, and then you can also make an official complaint to Denver. We ended up also asking people how happy they were feeling. How are you today? Are you feeling happy? Are you feeling sad? It's very difficult to connect odors with health effects. It's just nearly impossible. And then we don't have the science to do it yet. So we wanted to figure out, well, it seems to be that industrial odors is really affecting quality of life. We did show that statistically significant association between well-being and odors. So on the left, we have happiness with life. If you perceive that your odor is very fresh, then you have a much higher happiness with your life. In the middle, we also show that if you have a strong odor, your satisfaction with how your life turned out was low. And if you had satisfaction with standard of living that was high, your odor acceptability was also high. So this does not prove cause and effect, but it does show an important association in our communities. This data show just some directional information that we were trying to track where people were reporting us odors in relative to the source. And Purina is one of the main sources of complaints. And so here we were able to show that complaints in Globeville and that the sources, the Globeville and Northeast downtown complaints were connected with Purina under different wind conditions. As a result of our work and many other communities and scientists, I'm very proud to say that Denver did implement a new odor ordinance, and I really recommend neighbors and communities stand this odor ordinance and take advantage of this opportunity to work with the city to address odors. I want to move just briefly in the few more last minutes that I have to the work that we've done on traffic-related air pollution, because I think this is critical for your communities to understand that when you live near major roadways, you are impacted, your health is impacted, and finding ways to work on that. So our study doing respiratory health and assessing communities all across the Front Range showed us with this next slide that in fact, if you have more traffic related, and this is a data presentation that's quite complex. It's showing the odds ratio that if you have more traffic related coming into your home, you report more respiratory symptoms. So wheezing, current asthma, coughing, difficulty sleeping at night. You live closer to a major roadway, you are going to have more of that air pollution coming in because you have a higher air exchange rate, and you're going to report more health effects. In our study that Esther summarized, these are the kinds of endpoints that we are also looking at, but we're really trying to understand personal exposure for PM 2.5. And so here's some of the data from our participants showing that the PM 2.5 can range as high as 200. But many of our participants show low levels of PM 2.5 during their daily activities. We also report out different PM 2.5 averages and when they've been exposed to PM 2.5 and what their levels are. And we've built and provided them with air cleaners that have been tested in our laboratory to be effective and low cost, easy to maintain, easy to make more. If you need one in your kitchen, in your bedroom, in your living room, you can make them for like $60 instead of going and buying a $200 to $300 commercial air cleaner. And with that, I think I will end and answer any questions or just be available. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Shelly. Thanks very much.
Sure.
Can you take this back? We do like one question just to check.
Sure, sure, if there's questions.
If anybody has a question or.
We want to keep up.
Sure,
Sure, is there
Esther.
a chat? I
Yeah.
don't have access to the chat.
Yeah.
Is there?
I have access to the chat.
Or if there's anybody here that had a question.
Or,
Or
For
online, you could
Shelly
raise
or
your hand.
Esther, or
Otherwise,
anybody else that's spoken, or we can keep moving on too. I just want to make sure.
we can save our questions for the end.
That sounds
if
good
We
too.
want,
I don't see any hands.
All right, yeah.
okay, then
Seems
we'll
good.
just keep moving.
All right.
Next, we have Bill Oberman from Denver Department of Health and Environment. Correct me if I get this wrong, Bill. Great to see you. Thank you, and I'm gonna try to ask for the time.
Yeah, you bet. Keep me on time.
Okay, all right.
Okay. 5 minutes is not much.
Did you have a presentation?
Okay, that's 5 minutes.
Yes.
Let's do it. Wow, it's a lot of information, right? It's like, take a breath here for a second.
Oh, good.
So in 5 minutes, what I'm gonna do is just give you an understanding of who I am, what I represent today, where I'm from in the city, and what we're doing. So again, my name is Bill Oberman. I'm a air program supervisor in our Denver Department of Public Health and Environment. Okay, you heard about the Denver Department of Public Health and Environment during COVID. You know, the public health environment was the one that was shutting down all the different businesses and all of the different ordinances came out. In that public health department is a whole environmental section. And I'm fortunate to be able to focus on air quality 100% of my time. So that's what I do in the city of Denver. We have a lot of really good programs going on in Denver. One of them is called, and you'll see it's on the agenda item, it's called the Love My Air program. And just a show of hands really quick in the room, has anybody heard of the Love My Air program and what we're doing? All right, Joel's heard of it. Andy's heard of it, Laura's heard of it. That's great. So this is a program, and I'm going to spend very little time with it. It's a program in schools that's monitoring air quality right at our school properties. 35 to 40 Denver public schools actually have PM 2.5 sensors on the schools. So what Laura was talking about, that PM 2.5, what we just heard Shelly talking about, Dr. Miller, PM 2.5, we're monitoring that too in the city, and we're doing that on to perpetuity. The other thing we're doing, Cultivando mentioned, we have all of this monitoring data coming in, right? The work that Cultivando's done with PM 2.5 and all those other pollutants. The city of Denver is also funding ongoing monitoring moving forward at Lorraine Granado Park, which is at 52nd and Steel, used to be called Swansea Neighborhood Park. So that's a really positive new program that we have in the Department of Public Health at Denver, and I'm in charge of that program. My business card is on that back table. I definitely encourage all of you to grab that card and ask me questions, because that's what I'm here for. So you've seen an incredible amount of research and data and new information coming out on air pollution. At personal monitors you wear on your person, the complicated work that Cultivando's doing with big monitoring stations. What does this all mean? That's where I'm involved, is taking that data and doing something with it. So where we're doing things with it today is at the state level. Like Councilwoman CdeBaca said, the local government here of Denver doesn't have actually that much authority on these big pollution sources. It's the state that does.
Yes.
So we work at the state level, and we work in all kinds of they call them rulemakings, that you can be involved in too. And some of the folks in this audience are. And so that's why I'm here too. I want to hear from you. I want to understand your perspective, how you feel living in this area. Those are important things to know as we go to state rulemakings that will increase the monitoring here, that will increase the regulations on places like Suncor, that will reduce emissions from transportation over time. We're going to constantly be doing new rules on the ozone. I've been ever since I've been in this field for 20 years. We're going to keep on doing it for the next, well, decades to come, unfortunately, but it's true. So that was my 5 minutes probably. That's what I wanted to say. And, you know, see me as a person to come to talk about air pollution, how it makes you feel, so that we understand our communities better as we go to the state and work on those air quality rulemakings in the future.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, thank you very much.
This is a perfect segue to our representative from the state, Joel Minor.
Do you have my slides or do you need me to?
No, not at all.
Sorry, something that's true. My computer, I can email them to you. What's easiest?
Okay.
So maybe while that's going on, is there any burning question we have from the audience in the chat?
So let me,
To the hotspot.
Sorry, but we have Christine O'Connor, you have a question?
Well, not really a question, just something maybe Joel can address or some of the speakers already. I think this data is great, but we've had it for a long time and incremental rulemaking doesn't seem to be increasing with the village. So I'm concerned about just hearing data. That's just something.
That's a really good question, Christine, and maybe Joel can take, can look at that, or Candi works at the. We also have two guests here from Earth Justice. That we haven't introduced. We've worked with Earth Justice, Robert Regonian and Eric Word. They are involved in this, but it's a good question. What are we doing about it? Is it just the same old? Gertie, I think, had a.
Do you want to respond?
Candi, do you have a response to?
From the city council perspective, as someone who, suffers from the health of the area.
Candi, do you mind standing up so we can speak, so we can?
As someone who has suffered from the impacts of living in this area, I don't think that it should be left just up to the state. And many of my constituents agree with that. And so last year when we ended up passing the air monitoring bill, the initial reason we went to the state was to address the preemption issues that didn't allow the city to set higher standards. And so one of the things I've been talking to Bill about is how do we get an administration or coax an administration to want to set higher standards at the local level, and then go fight for lifting those preemption issues at the state level. We tried really hard to lift those preemption issues in the air monitoring bill, and that got cut out. But we're not done yet, and we want to keep going. We just need to build more momentum across the state to ask for that local control to set higher standards. And so I think that that is something we've heard other counties asking for. We just need to build more of the political will to do it.
Thank you, Candi. That's really where this from the city level, we could take action. Gertie, you had a question?
Again, when Suncor was shut down because of the frozen pipes, the monitoring continued. Did any of your statistics show the drastic difference in the air pollution when Suncor was shut down?
Maybe Laura or Shaina? Laura, can you speak to that?
What I remember, and I'm not the scientist, is there really wasn't much difference, but you also have to remember that Suncor didn't completely shut down. It was on safe mode. So even though it was shut down, there was still emitting high levels of pollution. Specifically that one time that they emitted lots of benzene into the river. So it's hard to compare when they're not really completely shut down.
Thank you.
That's what my air quotes were about earlier.
You guys, Shaina has to.
I just want to respond to one of your questions. Right now, next week on Monday, we're going to do a press conference with a coalition of people that have been working on ozone policy. And we would invite you to be there in support of, we don't know when it's going to be introduced. It's supposed to be introduced Monday, but now they're kicking the ball. But we would like to get community support to support this press conference on the ozone bill that we've been working with our justice team. And some of them are here, so they might be able to answer some more questions, but they're not speaking today. But we are holding that press conference at the Capitol at 9:30 a.m. at the West Foyer area. We welcome community members to come out and show support of why we need an ozone bill that will take meaningful action and enforcement to address the minor sources that these industries are claiming and address those issues, as well as address cumulative impacts as well to be also included. But the governor's office is also working on a clean energy bill because hydrogen funding is coming to all states that are incorporating hydrogen energy, which is not a good energy. As Moms Clean Air Force, we will support any hydrogen technology because it infringes on the tribal sovereignty of tribal communities and leaves them out of they have already left them out of the conversation of hydrogen. So that's why Moms Clean Air Force has a team in support of hydrogen, but there is funding that's coming to states to mitigate hydrogen funding projects. So that is one thing that we want to ensure that the state takes into account that environmental justice equities are taken into account, as well as other factors of not increasing our emissions and reaching that state goals of House Bill 1261, the climate action plan to reduce pollution. So come out on Monday and show support to this bill that Earth Justice have been working on with our community coalition members and organizations.
What time at the Capitol?
9:30 a.m. is
What room?
West Warrior. It'll be on the west of the Capitol.
Great, thank you, Shaina. Thank you for that. We're gonna keep moving. Next is Joel Minor, and he is from the state.
So thanks, Drew, and sorry for the technical difficulties with my presentation. I think I'm gonna jump right into it. Normally I would cover a little more about what environmental justice is and what we do, but I know we're short on time, so I'll just say, I think you know what environmental justice is, right? It is exactly what we've been talking about this morning of why communities of color and low-income communities in Colorado, like most other states, are disproportionately exposed to pollution. I will cover a little bit about who we are because I think it is a symbol of the power that has been exercised by communities like this one. I used to work before I joined the state at Earth Justice, and when I first started working with Drew and Councilwoman CdeBaca back in 2016, there was no environmental justice program within state government in Colorado. And the power that has been exercised by communities here in North Denver and in Commerce City and in Pueblo and really around the state has really led to some transformational changes within state government. And that doesn't mean that we've solved all the air quality problems that are affecting communities like Globeville. We're far away from that, but we are actually taking significant progress. So I'm going to talk today about what we are doing to actually address the problems with all of the air monitoring data, right? You saw, I think, a great explanation of what the problem is here in Globeville from Laura and from the researcher from CU Boulder. So you might not have a lot of hope that there's anything we can do about it, but we are actually taking the most significant step that any state has ever taken to address air quality issues in disproportionately impacted communities through rulemaking that's happening before the Air Quality Control Commission in May. And I really want to spend a little time making sure everyone here knows what that is and how to get involved. To Bill's point, it is really critical for communities to be involved in those rulemaking. So this is the definition of environmental justice. I drew out my slides to share with you that's in the Environmental Justice Act, House Bill 21-066. I'm not going to read it out loud, but feel free to read it to yourself. And then I did briefly just want to highlight kind of who we are at CDPHE. So prior to 2021, there was no environmental justice program really anywhere in state government. In 2021, that changed with a series of laws passed by the legislature that created environmental justice obligations, not just at CDPHE, but in other state agencies, with the Public Utilities Commission, the Colorado Department of Transportation, the Colorado Energy Office, as well as the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, now all have work dedicated to environmental justice and prioritizing pollution reduction in communities of color and low-income communities, as well as ensuring that those communities are meaningfully involved. And we actually have a team of 11 people at CDPHE working on environmental justice, which is huge. And we are doing this work every day. It ranges from partnering with community groups. So through our Community Connectors program, we work directly with Laura and Cultivando, as well as 3 other community groups here in Denver and in Pueblo, to kind of hear what issues are important to those organizations and then provide programming or resources or events that are responsive to those needs. So Laura, I apologize, this presentation I'm about to give is the same one I'm going to give at your environmental justice workshop on the 19th. So today I'm giving it in English, not Spanish. We do a lot of work around language justice. We have a full-time translator and a part-time interpreter on our team because of a large number of folks here in North Denver, as well as in Commerce City, who prefer speaking Spanish, or just that's the language of their heart is what we like to say in terms of language justice. We do a lot of research and analysis on. Earlier, one of the CU researchers referenced Colorado EnviroScreen. We update and maintain that tool. That's what Ron Kumar does. We have an environmental justice advisory board that oversees grants that we use to fund projects around the state, including here. We just announced who received our first $1 million of funding yesterday, actually, or day before yesterday. So you can go on our website and see what those groups are. And then last but certainly not least, we work on responding to complaints and concerns from the community. So Marcus Howell is our environmental justice ombudsperson, and he is in charge of responding to complaints. You can go to our website. It's very easy to submit a complaint and Marcus will respond to it. And one of the things that's key to that is he can really help navigate the complex bureaucracy that is CDPHE, make sure your complaint gets to the people who are able to deal with it. So I'm now going to talk about this specific rulemaking. First, you might wonder, what is a rulemaking, right? So you just heard Shaina talking about the legislature. So the legislature makes laws. Laws usually have kind of high-level mandates, right? They may say something like reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 20% by 2030. But what does that mean in practice? What that means is agencies, so the state executive branch, agencies like CDPHE have to adopt rules that spell out specifically how we are going to achieve those goals that are set by the legislature. So the rulemaking is really important because that's really where the rubber hits the road, right? Those details are really important. And that's really where the actual sort of standards that facilities have to comply with are set. Usually agencies propose a rule to an independent border commission. So at CDPHE, we have our air pollution control division. They are staff, they are state civil servants like me, they are full-time employees. So usually they propose a rule to the air quality control commission, which is a volunteer board that's made up of volunteers who are appointed by the governor. And they actually decide what the rules will be. But in fact, anyone can propose a rule. So in the rulemaking I'm talking about today, Earth Justice has actually brought forward an alternative proposal to the rule that is proposed by the Air Pollution Control Division, and both will be considered by the Air Quality Control Commission. So usually it's up to agencies to propose those. In fact, anyone can propose a rule. So again, for air quality, the Air Pollution Control Division, our staff, they're kind of the state equivalent of Bill. They are experts on air quality who come up with how are we going to implement these laws, but the Air Quality Control Commission is the ultimate decider. So how does the Air Quality Control Commission make those decisions? It's a very formal process. It's very legalistic. Anybody can participate in that process. If you want to participate formally, you have to register to be a party. So party to a rulemaking has certain rights. They can file basically briefs, which are written statements. We call them hearing statements and rebuttals. They can call witnesses and give testimony at a formal hearing on the rule before the Air Quality Control Commission. The deadline to request party status for this rulemaking has already passed, but there are a lot of organizations I see represented in the room who are parties. So Earth Justice as attorneys are representing several, I believe 4 of those groups as a party in the rulemaking I'm talking about today, including Cultivando, which is one of the parties to the rulemaking. Denver is also a party to the rulemaking through what we call the local government coalition. So there are a lot of folks who are involved in filing those briefs and statements, and the one I'm talking about today. It is a very legalistic process. So I do want to note that we maintain a list of lawyers who are willing to represent community organizations free of charge in these rulemakings. It's called pro bono representation. So if you ever have a question, you say, hey, I really want to participate in this rulemaking, but it's kind of too complicated for me without a lawyer, and I want to find a free lawyer, you can reach out to us, and we are more than happy to connect you with those lawyers who have volunteered to do so free of charge. So again, who can participate? Anyone can become a party. Those parties get special rights. They're usually represented by lawyers, but there are other ways you can also participate just without becoming a party. So any person can submit comments either in writing or verbally during the hearing. And that's a great way to directly have your voice heard without having to go through the formal legalistic process. And I can tell you, having been someone who both works from the outside within, when I was at Earth Justice, in these proceedings. I later worked at the Attorney General's office representing state agencies, and now I work with a staff from state agency. I've seen time and time again that specific comments that people gave within a rulemaking moved the needle, right? Commissioners are listening and they hear that, and when they see people coming and telling their stories why this is important to them, that really does matter, right? So I don't want you to think that your voice doesn't matter, because I can tell you on multiple occasions where I've seen a comment really influence what the commission decides. So now I'm going to get into the specifics of this rulemaking. I first want to explain what I mean by the term disproportionately impacted community. I'm going to use DI community as an acronym for today. I try to avoid acronyms, but it's a really long term. I'm glad we don't have interpreters, because in Spanish it is unidades afectadas en una manera desproporcionada. It's even more syllables, so it's a long phrase. But essentially what that means is a community that is more impacted by pollution than other communities. So this is a definition that is set by the State Environmental Justice Act, House Bill 21-1266, which is what requires us to do this rulemaking and is what created the program that I oversee. It applies at the census block group level, which is a geographic scale that is actually the smallest level of data available. So here, actually, I don't know off the top of my head for Globeville, but as an example, in Swansea, a census block group would be anything north of I-70, south of the Adams County line, between the railroad tracks by the Stock Show and Brighton Boulevard, or sorry, and Vasquez Boulevard. So you can kind of imagine it's about neighborhood level. It's a little smaller than Swansea. Is one census block group. There are 4 factors that can make something a disproportionately impacted community in this rulemaking that we are proposing. These are, again, the factors laid out by the statute. So it's a census block group that more than 40% of people are low income, more than 40% of people are people of color, more than 40% of the households are housing cost burden, meaning they spend more than 30% of their household income on rent or mortgage, housing costs. And finally, communities that experience cumulative impacts. You heard a lot about cumulative impacts from Laura's presentation earlier, and really cumulative impacts are when there are multiple sources of pollution, as well as other factors that come together to make a community more impacted. So we use Colorado EnviroScreen, which is our interactive environmental justice mapping tool that brings together 35 different indicators covering basically all the different types of environmental pollution that can be experienced, types of environmental effects, so facilities that are in a community that are causing those impacts, climate vulnerabilities, a range of socioeconomic factors and demographic factors. So it's really that whole picture that shows who's bearing the most cumulative health burdens. We look at communities that have the 80th percentile score and above, so the top 20th percent most impacted communities, according to identify those communities that have cumulative impacts. So sort of complicated, but that's showing how we are taking these concepts that are a little abstract, like environmental justice, and actually building them into state law. So what are we doing in this rulemaking? First, we are adopting a regulatory definition of disproportionately impacted community that is just a little more specific than what's in the statute and tells everyone how we are implementing the definition in the context of this specific rule. Second, we are requiring all new applicants for permits, as well as people who are renewing certain types of permits, to submit environmental justice summaries when they apply for their air pollution permits. So we are actually requiring them to tell us what is the picture of the community where you are applying for a permit at the time that they apply for the permit. So this is the first time that actually any state has adopted a rule that is like this, that says we are prioritizing environmental justice, and we don't just care about, are you complying with the Clean Air Act? We're actually looking at where is this facility located, so that we as regulators have a picture of what is going on in that community and whether it is more impacted than other communities across the state. We are then adopting enhanced monitoring requirements. So we are requiring more air monitoring for those facilities that are located in disproportionately impacted communities for sort of key pollutants that we're most worried about. So a lot of the ones that Laura was discussing, benzene, toluene, ethyl benzene, and xylene, which are all air toxics, as well as PM 2.5, that's fine particulate matter that we've heard a lot about today. We are also creating an option for facilities that are located generally more far away from where people live to pay into a fund instead of doing their own monitoring in order to fund community-based monitoring projects and as well as kind of health education projects, right? So we know that there is a need that is being done by Cultivando, as well as kind of more interpretation of what is all the data that they're getting from these monitors. When we did listening sessions around the state about what do people want to see, we definitely heard that there are places like Commerce City that have a lot of monitors, right? We don't necessarily need a lot more data, but we really need to figure out what does that data mean for people's health? And by building that into this rulemaking, we then have flexibility to say, okay, instead, if we have a facility in a location where maybe we don't need a lot of monitoring, there are a lot of disproportionately impacted communities in rural areas where not a lot of people live. They have the option to pay a fee where we can then use that fee to fund projects like the work being done by Cultivando or our own work at the state. We are also requiring, sorry, this actually should say, well, this is a little duplicative, sorry, I'm touching on my slides now. So again, we're requiring enhanced modeling. We're also requiring more modeling, which means mathematical exercises to understand what does the data that we are monitoring, that we see in our monitors, how does that translate into actual exposures to pollutants? So we use math to kind of calculate that. So we're requiring additional modeling for those facilities that are located in disproportionately impacted communities, so that at the permitting stage, we have a better sense of what the permit is going to do to people's health. So why is this important? I'm sorry, this is my first time doing this presentation. So I think I managed to duplicate this bullet, and I left something really important out, which is that we're actually requiring emissions reductions at facilities as well. So this is something that wasn't required by the Environmental Justice Act, but when we went around the state and did listening sessions about this rule, we heard that people don't want just more data. We heard that communities really want us to do something about that data and actually reduce the pollution. So we're requiring facilities in the most polluted communities to adopt what's called reasonably available control technology, which is kind of a fancy Clean Air Act term that means actual technologies that will reduce pollution at those sources, which wouldn't be required otherwise, right? So that means that for the first time, we are adopting these requirements for reduced pollution at facilities that are located in our most impacted communities. So why does this rule matter? Again, it is the first rule that is requiring more monitoring at facilities specifically because they are located in a DI community. It is expanding modeling requirements to provide those additional protections and information about potential health exposures in DI communities, is funding community monitoring projects, is actually reducing pollution by applying that reasonably available control technology standard, and we are applying it to permits for both new and existing facilities. Again, that's not something we are required to do by the Environmental Justice Act, but we heard it time and again that communities didn't want this just for new permits, right? There are a lot of places like Globeville, like Commerce City, where we don't have a lot of new facilities being built. It's really important to consider our existing facilities that are already contributing to those cumulative problems. So how can you get involved? So the rulemaking is going to be happening, I believe it is May 16th through 19th, coming up in May. You can submit written public comments. I know I'm over time.
No, you're fine.
So,
This is good.
Yeah, so you can submit written comments by May 2nd. That's coming up soon. You can email them to the address on the screen. You can easily find that on our website as well. You can submit comments in English or Spanish. The Spanish comments will be translated by a professional translator, because unfortunately not all of our members are bilingual. You can also send a video of yourself. You can record yourself speaking as a video to the same address by the same deadline, again, in English or Spanish, if you would prefer doing that instead of providing comments in writing. You can also sign up to come to the rulemaking and share your ideas with the commission verbally. So again, the time for that is going to be on May 16th from 4:30 to 7:30 p.m. It will be over Zoom. You can provide comments in English or Spanish. There will be interpretation. You can sign up on that website. The sign up will open on April 24th. We have had an issue with many of our past rulemakings at the Air Commission that more people sign up than there is time available. And unfortunately, there has been some gaming of the system where some groups will kind of sign up like 100 people right when the system opens. So to prevent that from happening, and that has happened mostly with industry stakeholders in the rulemaking. So to avoid that gaming of the system, we are opening up a new system where we'll essentially have a lottery. If we have more people who sign up and there are slots available, we'll use a random lottery so that you don't have to log on like right at 8 a.m. right when it opens. We guaranteed a slot. Instead, regardless of when you sign up, you'll be entered into that lottery. But within that lottery, we are going to give priority consideration to people who have not provided a comment before the Air Quality Control Commission, people who are providing comments in language other than English, elected officials, and people who have some sort of disability that means they have a harder time providing a comment. So we are going to give sort of a leg up to folks with an interest of equity in that lottery. Each commenter does have 2 minutes. For the first time ever, air commissioners will be able to sort of respond and have a dialogue with commenters, though that will be a little more limited because I think the commission will want there to be enough time for everyone to deliver their comments, but this will give the commissioners a chance to kind of verbally respond and have a conversation with commenters in a way that the Air Commission has never done before, but you may be familiar with some other commissions like the oil and gas. I'll get to you in just one second.
Question about the rule that's being suggested. Do the commissioners have the ability, if they're looking at small and cumulative effects, to apply stricter standards if there are higher cumulative effects in that neighborhood, or just advise them to get the best technology?
So that is what the division, the Air Pollution Control Division, has proposed with the rule. We are proposing the greatest protections, so that application of reasonably available control technology in communities that experience cumulative impacts. We define them as cumulatively impacted communities. It's those communities that score 80th percentile and above in your BioScreen. I do want to acknowledge Earth Justice has been opposed to that, so they have suggested an alternative proposal that those protections should apply everywhere that meets the definition of disproportionately impacted community, including the areas that only need it under the demographic factors. But we did feel it was really important to prioritize the greatest protections in the communities that experience those cumulative impacts.
The protections aren't stricter standards for that area. The protections are just to use the best technology.
Yes, so the way our permitting processes work, we apply, this is just how the Clean Air Act works, right? So it applies technology-based standards to individual sources of air pollution within a facility. So at a place like Suncor that has lots of engines and smokestacks and other operating things, there are hundreds of individual sources, each of which gets a special technology designation within its air permit. And so how stringent that technology is and how effective it is in reducing pollution is a very complicated thing. There's like 4 or 5 different acronyms under the Clean Air Act that we call it backed, wrapped, layer, and a few others that I'm forgetting. So we are essentially applying stricter standards that typically only apply in areas that are not in compliance with federal air quality standards. To pollutants where we actually are currently in compliance with those standards through this rulemaking, so that we have those stricter technology-based standards that apply to the sources of pollution of those air toxics and PM 2.5, as well as nitrogen oxides at those facilities. So it is an enhanced form of protection just within the framework we have to work in the Clean Air Act. Yeah.
What does enforcement of that look like? How big is that team and what happens and what is the local level?
Sure. So that's a great question. That's really not part of this rulemaking, but that's part of another initiative I wasn't planning to talk about today, but that is probably the thing I'm most proud that we have done since I joined the Environmental Justice Program at CDPHE. Last year, we signed an agreement with EPA Region 8 to prioritize enforcement and compliance in disproportionately impacted communities. 2 weeks ago, we released our final work plan spelling out how we are going to do that. And so how we are going to do that is first, we are prioritizing inspections in disproportionately impacted communities. So we unfortunately haven't received more funding from the legislature to have more inspectors, but with the inspectors we have, we are now requiring them to focus on disproportionately impacted communities. So we are increasing the overall percentage of our inspections that happen in DI communities, make sure that our boots on the ground are in the places where they are most needed. We also are basically going to be partnering with EPA on major enforcement actions to have more resources to bring to bear on actual enforcement actions in DI communities. So it's really resource intensive to take a big enforcement action against a facility like Suncor or a power plant that has a really big complex permit. And we've agreed with EPA that we're going to start essentially sharing our resources across teams and working collaboratively to bring joint enforcement actions against those facilities. We are also going to be starting to prioritize more supplemental environmental projects with our enforcement teams and communities. So those are projects where when a facility violates the law and we levy an enforcement penalty against them, instead of paying that penalty, they have the option of funding a supplemental environmental project. That's actually what funded Cultivando's monitoring project. And so we're going to start doing more of those in communities and also really spreading the word in meetings like this about our idea library. So any person at any time can submit an idea to us to get their project funded. We will work with you to essentially get it shovel ready. So ready that as soon as there is an enforcement action in your community, we can get that connected with penalty revenue. That means that instead of the facilities kind of having free range to sort of choose any sort of project they want to fund through the enforcement action, we can make sure that those projects are going to be the ones that communities are most interested in. And then finally, we're starting to do community engagement about our enforcement action. We've historically never engaged communities about enforcement actions, especially while they're in progress. We have our first major engagement session coming up on May 1st about what we're doing to implement the enforcement MOU. So that's on our website. I'd encourage folks to sign up. And we'll be having more to come about specific enforcement actions we're thinking about other facilities.
Just on the local piece, what was the limitation to allowing the local jurisdiction to have that joint enforcement authority?
That's a great question. There are, as you alluded, there's sort of preemption related question, a lot of roles that the state government plays rather than the local government, but there absolutely is local government enforcement authority for some air quality related things. Bill could speak to that more. Our agreement isn't with local governments, but it's a great suggestion that we should be thinking about the role of those local governments in this MOU.
Absolutely.
So that Joel is so knowledgeable about this stuff. We're so lucky to have him. I'm sure we could really, and he knows the really technical aspects of this. We have one more speaker. And so I want to get to Rocky. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Can I finish this last slide?
Oh, sure.
So I do want to just quickly highlight, if you haven't read it, what is the most helpful way to get involved, right? So I absolutely do not want to tell anyone in this room, here's what you need to say in your comments, right? That would be fully inappropriate for government to tell you that. But what I can tell you is the type of comment that is most impactful for the commission. So the types of comments that are most helpful are first telling your story, tell who you are, where you live, why you care about air pollution, so the commission has context. It's so important for the commissioners to hear from people who live in disproportionately impacted communities in this rulemaking. Second, say whether you're in support of the proposed rule or whether you oppose it. That basic information is really key for the commissioners to understand where you're coming from. And then explain why you support or oppose what the proposed rule is. And then finally, highlight a specific part of the rule that you support and oppose and or why, right? So maybe that those technology standards that actually reduce pollution are the most important thing to you. Tell the commission that and tell them why that's most important, right? So those comments give the commissioners what they can then rely on when they deliberate to say, I heard from this commenter that this was really important to them, so I'm going to vote yes on this, right? Or I heard from commenters that they didn't agree with this part of the proposal, which is why I think we should change it. And so that's really how you make your comments. So I'm so sorry I went over time, but I really did the opportunity to speak.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Joel. That's almost a whole presentation in itself.
Just so you,
More.
yeah, we do have questions online, but we can hold them.
Could we, hey, and we have one speaker, Rocky Perot. It's good to see you, Rocky.
Good to see
But
you, Drew.
Rocky, we're really have to hold you to, we're really gonna. Because you
Let's
have
do
to-
this, Drew. Let me
Alright.
give you guys a couple of options. So one, I can just send you my presentation and you guys can distribute it and share it with those in attendance and in the larger community. Or you can reschedule me for another time if that would help.
almost
I know we're deep into
think,
your Q&A time.
Yeah, Rocky, I think that you would be a whole good presentation in and of yourself. Just planning, how does planning address this? And I think that's probably a good choice, Rocky. I hope you'll stay on maybe for some questions.
Oh,
But
you bet.
Thank you so much, Rocky, but we have, it's 10:50 and I think maybe we should go to questions now. So I can't read the chat, but do you want to?
Let's start with the chat, yeah.
Joanne?
And also Rocky, if Rocky wants to answer any of the chat questions too, because he has been along the way.
Oh, okay.
Today, so feel free to pop in there.
Great.
As well.
You want me to
So,
ask?
thanks so
Yeah,
much.
when
Want
it's,
to read the question?
Miles had a few.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can ask the person to ask their question.
Well, I will say
Someone
too
else.
that Rocky put it, there's a planning to thrive Colorado symposium that he put in the chat that's coming up. And maybe we can talk about that a little bit too.
That's-
But I think you want to talk to Miles.
Yeah, so Miles, I don't know if you want to unmute and come on, because you're very prolific. You have a lot of questions. Maybe you can pick your favorite question and And just ask it. Do you want to do that, or do you want me to ask it?
I guess I can ask, I've got a couple of questions, just quickly from the last speaker about communities and protecting them. I was just wondering, I know fracking had been talked about in small particle release and it impacting people's health, and I was just wondering how they're dealing with that. And then in regards to Denver, I was just wondering what the correlation is between new construction of large buildings, like because there's a push to go quite dense and large buildings and redevelopment, what the impacts of that are on air pollution, if anyone's looked at construction and maintenance of the building and long-term energy to keep the building cool, and what the impacts are from generating that energy. And then also environmentally, we're moving into climate change and being an inland city, and maybe more, we're going to have more heat during the summer, and how that might impact us because we're inland. I'm just wondering if anyone's done any projections. And again, you've got Suncor coming in, and what is that all working together with new heat and new environmental changes, and how that might impact the city?
Those are a lot of questions, Joel. Do you want to?
I'll answer the first one. I got up in front of the owls to try and projecting. So I'm just going to speak right at the owl.
It's this one actually, but yeah.
Okay, so the rule that I talked about does apply to permits for oil and gas development that are located in disproportionately impacted communities. So those enhanced monitoring requirements would apply at hydraulically fractured as well as other oil and gas sites. Most of our oil and gas development in Colorado involves hydraulic fracturing. There are a small amount of sort of traditional completions, but regardless of that completion method, the rule would apply at oil and gas locations that are located in disproportionately impacted communities. Certainly not all oil and gas development happens in Colorado in disproportionately impacted communities. Some of it happens in more affluent areas, but there are a lot of disproportionately impacted communities, especially on the Highway 85 corridor, where there are high proportions of people who identify as Latinx and lower income populations in places like Fort Lupton and Greeley. Additionally, in 2021, the Air Quality Control Commission actually adopted specific monitoring requirements that require essentially on-site monitoring for all new oil and gas operations. So this rule that I talked about would supplement those existing monitoring requirements, but we do already have those kind of robust monitoring requirements in effect for all oil and gas locations within the state. And I'll let Bill answer the rest of it.
Yeah, I can answer. Miles, thanks for your question. This is Bill Oberman with the city of Denver. On the housing construction side, and just construction in general, we have 2 inspectors in Denver. This is one thing I wanted to add to Joel's comments earlier. They do respond to complaints, and we receive that about construction dust. We don't do monitoring specifically for dust with like housing development, but we instead respond to complaints on those issues. And that's one of our top 3 areas of complaints is dust. The other is we have an odor inspector. And one of the areas that we're constantly responding to is actually Purina complaints. And we have levied fines against them in the recent past, which is the first time ever actually in Denver. So we do have 2 inspectors in Denver, and they are complementing a lot of the inspections that the state does here in this area. And Denver's one of the only cities that has dedicated inspector staff. So we do have inspectors out there making sure people are complying with the rules that apply to them.
Yeah, and I'll add, Bill, that I work in the new construction world, and Denver itself has very progressive building codes that also involve air pollution control and energy efficiency and water use and everything that goes into building a new building to make it be built more sustainably. So that is, yeah.
And I would add, on the city council side of things, one of the frustrations I've had with our zoning code
is that when we decide on a zoning, one of the criteria is that it's improves health and safety in a community, but it's very vague. And so one of the things I've been advocating for is to either change the zoning code or change that criterion to build out what that means and include some of these health impact issues. Or very specific environmental justice related issues. Another thing we've looked into is a community bill of rights, which kind of is a community benefit agreement on the front end of development, where just like a transportation demand management plan is required of some developments, we require a community bill of rights that can include cumulative health impact studies for areas that are disproportionately affected. It's on my agenda and hoping to get some council backup on that, but that's something other cities have tried to embed into zoning to make these changes, address these issues.
And I'm gonna give Rocky a second here to speak as well, just because he had a big comment about this.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll just be quick. I mean, one thing to add, the other folks did a masterful job addressing Miles' key concerns. I mean, one of the things that's happening in the construction industry is moving more and more to energy efficiency review and to ensure that the pollution related impacts of buildings becomes minimal. We've been on that journey. A lot of it, I need to actually say, give kudos to the construction sector because they did take the lead on this. And I know this is something that Denver embraces as it reviews building proposals.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Rocky.
Do we have more questions? Because I have a question. if no one does.
Okay,
Anyway.
Joanna.
Joanna.
Well,
So thank you everyone for bringing this to my attention. I'm sitting here and
Joanna, do you mind standing up and speaking, because so everybody can hear you?
yeah, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I'm sitting here as, you know, a mom of 3, and what really struck me was the schooling of my air is that in this
Yeah.
and a professional volunteer, so I'm in my schools a lot, and I didn't hear this. And so I think if we could actually have that involved with the students and they could advocate for it, then we can follow what was given with how to, when speaking to lawmakers. And I don't mind orchestrating, having other parents and students come and talking about this because it affects, as Shaina had said, how much it affects and how it's affected in the past. So I think it's really important to jump on that. As a DPS parent, I had no idea. And so I would like for that to be brought up. And also just sitting here when someone made the comment and being very like, you could be friends or not. I mean, understanding that how serious this is. So I would love to help with that.
Yeah. That's not her. Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah, well, thank you everybody for presenting and like, thank you, Drew, for putting this all together. This was pretty awesome. Right. We have 50 people between online and here, and I think it just an amazing program. We do want to get on with the rest of the day so that we can all go enjoy the nice weather out as well. So in committee reports, hoping these can be pretty quick. Joel, are you on still?
Hey, everybody, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
And if you want to maybe talk about the I-25 as well during your committee report, that's fine.
Absolutely. The INC Transportation Committee continues to meet every other month. Our next meeting will be the second Thursday in May, putting together the agenda now. A couple things just to point out for folks. Friday, the call for participants on the sidewalk committee to implement what the voters approved last November in 307, transferring responsibility for sidewalks from individual property owners to the city, closed. So I hear from Dottie that they had well over 100 people express interest in being on the task force to come up with the specific details. That's exciting. Hopefully we'll know in the next few weeks who's appointed to that. That'll be fairly intensive work, meeting every week to come up with a package of proposed implementation, some of which will have city council action, some of which will be specific to DOTI. Another thing I want to call your attention to is all RNOs have been notified about a rulemaking change to residential parking permits. Scott Burton has come to the INC Transportation Committee in the past and talked about their goals for changing the residential parking permit program. And now they're actually proposing the rules and regs changes. I'm going to try to get him to our next meeting, but the hearing for this will be prior to our next meeting. The hearing will be on May 5th, as I recall. So take a look at that. And then finally, thank you to INC delegates for supporting the motion that came from the INC Transportation Committee, supporting the neighborhoods near I-25 and Broadway to ask DOTI to slow down or pause the I-25 and Broadway interchange implementation and re-examine some pieces. Now, as we know from the presentation here 2 meetings ago, DOTI was already agreeing to many of the things in there, but the northbound ramp changes, that change that will demolish several homes, is still in question. So the neighbors wanted me to communicate to the INC delegates, thank you for supporting them, and that helps them keep DOTI focused. Thanks.
Now you can.
Well, thank you, Joel. Next up, the Climate and Sustainability Committee.
Yeah, I'll be super brief. We're ramping up again with Climate and Sustainability Committee. Our first meeting is going to be April 13th. It is an evening meeting. We've sent out, that bell's going on behind me. We've sent out an invite for that. We'd love you all to be there. If you don't have the information, let me or Keith or Jane know, and we'll get it to you. The topic is going to be Resilient Denver. We're going to be talking about gaps in action versus policy on the city level in regards to sustainability. It's what we've been talking about a lot today. We have data, we want action. How do we do that? That's going to be the main topic of discussion. Did I read anything down? And I think that's good. Oh, if you do want to be part of the Climate and Sustainability Committee, please let me know, and we will absolutely find a way to get you involved. Thanks.
Thanks, Adam. Joanna with the Education Committee.
Hi, Joanna. You want to speak?
Yeah, Joanna. Yeah, if you want to come up
There's the
here.
speakers here.
All right, thank you so much. So the Education Committee update, we are working on the Denver INC 2023 Youth Civic Awards, and we are working directly with DPS to get out our flyer to all the schools. And at our last meeting, we will be showcasing 8 students that will be receiving an award. Also, we are focusing on we're hoping to assist local registered neighborhood organizations to connect with the DPS schools in their community to organize the walk, bike, and roll to school day, which would be May 3rd, and registration is now open. Lastly, I look forward to putting together a forum with my board members here regarding safe schools. And that is it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
if you would like to be involved, please reach out to me.
Yeah, thank you. And then finally, Lamone with the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee.
So the blue line is where I
Yes,
Yeah.
that works. I'll let you know. Yeah, you're good. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
My name is Lamone Knowles. This is
Yep.
your guy. All right, so my name is Lamone Knowles. I'm the president of the East Denver Residents Council and also committee chair for the DEI committee. We last met in December. That's when we talked to
Justin Cooper, who was a consultant hired to produce initial report on his findings with DEI as it relates to INC. We have not met since then because of the holidays and the 3,000 people who were running for mayor. Now we can exhale, right? So I plan to reconvene the committee. We do have a mission statement in progress. What we need to work on now is the goals and the objectives. Earlier this week, the board had a discussion and a debrief about what happened at East High School and the community response. And now that we have a context to community organized DEI, that's going to be a much heavier lift and not something that's going to occur overnight. So I'm definitely looking for people in the community who want to get involved and help us shape what that DEI policy is going to look like, specifically for what it's going to look like for IMC programming. So we're going to take a deeper dive into what that's going to look like and the actions we need to take. So for the May delegate meeting, Keith organized a DEI program with the Denver Elks on how they were able to implement DEI in their organization. That ought to be interesting. Then there's also speakers presenting about RNO outreach through the media and an RNO equity report presented by the Radiant organization. INC within has created a meeting checklist. It's pretty comprehensive. That includes DEI sensitivity in regards to reaching out to the neighborhoods where we're holding our meetings out in the community. So that's a good start for the committee, and that's the end of my report.
Thanks, Lamont. Great, and then we'll just breeze through announcements here real quick. I do want to say Jane Potts, who's here, her daughter has more than just your daughter. A group has put together an amazing series of films on water issues here in the West. The first one was last week. The next one will be tomorrow night. I don't know if you want to talk about it real quick.
The next one is Monday night at the Seed Film Center. It's called Winnebago Farm. So it's all the issues about regenerative farming practices and water use in agriculture. If you were not able to go to the first one and you're going to go to the second one, let me know, and she will send you a link so that you can watch the first film. And then the final one on April 17th is about the farming and ranching on the other side of the divide and how the water is accessed from the western slope to the east slope. So it's very comprehensive. And I just invite you to join us at one of those films.
Great, thanks, Jane. I got this email from Tom Brunn. I don't know if you're still on, Tom. Last night, he is the president of the Sloan's Lake neighborhoods or Sloan's Lake Citizens Group, which I'm a part of. So, as we all know, car theft is huge in Denver, and there apparently Kias and Hyundais are the biggest cars that are being stolen. I think Hyundai just put out a new change in their software to make it so that the cars can be less stolen with the key fob. So we just want to pass this on. We'll make sure to get this out to folks as well in terms of through our newsletter and stuff. But we did want to get that out there, which I think is important information. So. Next up is our upcoming meetings. Like Ramon said, we're going to be at the Denver Elks in Northwest Denver in May, and we're going to have some great presentations that Ramon already talked about concerning DEI, and then increasing membership and diversity within neighborhood organizations. And then Adam, I don't know if you want to touch on June.
Yeah, no, that's a good description. We're going to talk about alternative transportation, Vision Zero. If you don't know what that is in Denver, you'll find out. And the future of travel in Denver, which which should be zero emissions travel, which we talked a lot about today to reduce air quality issues.
And I'll just say, as we were having this meeting today, I got a notice on my phone that another pedestrian was hit near Sloan's Lake last night. So I think this is, I mean, Vision Zero, I think, I mean, I'm getting a notice pretty much every week on a pedestrian getting hit. So I think this is really relevant for Inc. to be talking about. So with that, is there any other announcements? Otherwise, we're gonna close up. All right, well, thank you. Thanks, everybody online for coming. We had 50 people at this meeting, so thanks again for everybody that came and presented. Happy Saturday morning. Thanks.
Hi, everyone.